the IDF chief of staff revealed there was a massive command and control center underground near the Israeli border, including tunnels, like a whole infrastructure. But it seems that the fighting on the ground, at least, is drawing to a close in southern Lebanon. The IDF said it hit over 150 targets over the past days. But there's also been reports in Israeli media of ongoing negotiations with international mediators to reach a 60-day ceasefire. And to work toward the implementation of Resolution 1701, basically the resolution that was adopted by the UN in 2006 to ensure the demilitarization of the area between the Israel-Lebanon border and the Litani River to the north. So what's interesting about this new development, which hasn't been confirmed by official sources in Israel, is that unlike the current status quo, it would grant Israel the possibility to intervene militarily in case Hezbollah attempts to entrench itself again near the border. So it could be a very interesting development. In any case, the military has said that it's wrapping up its ground operation. And, for sure, it's going to keep on striking targets across Lebanon, even after the ground operation is over.
A lot of this activity from the IDF seems to be in a bid to combat Hezbollah's drone operation. We've seen in the last 12 hours or so drone attacks from Hezbollah, and I think we've seen footage of one drone striking a pedestrian bridge at Naharaya train station. How much of a concern was that incident, and how much of a concern is the drone attacks by Hezbollah, and how big an operation is it to curb that?
So that strike in particular happened this morning. As you said, it hit a pedestrian bridge near a train station in Nahria, close to the Lebanon border. There were no injuries, only some material damage. So that strike specifically was not particularly concerning, but you're right that in general, the drones are a threat to which Israel has not yet found a solution. There have been some very concerning drone attacks, including one on a military base in the center of Israel, one on the residence of the prime minister over the past weeks. There is a technological solution that is being developed by two Israeli defense companies, Elbit and Rafael. It's called the light shield, and it's basically going to be a sort of laser that will be able to strike drones even before they enter Israeli territory. But it's going to take at least a year in order to be functional. So in the meantime, Israel is going to have to cope, and it is a danger. It's also a threat when it comes to the alert system, because a lot of times these drones don't activate the alert system because it cannot figure out whether it's just birds or a civilian drone. So it's really dangerous, and it's really something that it's hard for Israel to cope with. We've destroyed massive caches of weapons, but Hezbollah still has a lot of drones, and they're very easy to operate. UNRWA was very much entrenched to the population in Gaza. The IDF claims that about 10% of UNRWA workers, which were in the thousands in Gaza, were somehow involved with Hamas or the Islamic Jihad. But there's more of a political and ideological, I would say, concern, and that is the fact that UNRWA is the only refugee agency around the world that really allows the people to pass on the refugee status to following generations, and basically perpetuates the problem of Palestinian refugees forever and ever. And when Hamas and other terror organizations say that they want to take over historic Palestine, that's part of the problem is that there's narrative going on that all the refugees will be able to get back one day, and it's obviously not compatible with the survival of Israel as a Jewish majority state. So those are the main concerns. And the Knesset opened its winter session yesterday, and the first two laws it passed were two laws preventing UNRWA from operating on Israel territory. So there was one law, and the other law was to prevent it from preventing Israel authorities from dealing with UNRWA. So basically banning UNRWA workers from operating in Gaza, because Israel controls all access points into the Gaza Strip, and making it very hard for them to keep operating in the West Bank. There's been international backlash. The US has blasted the decision. And actually, we're expecting backlash from the EU, and there's been threats of suspensions of Israel's membership to the United Nations. So it's really a bold move, and we really can't foresee the consequences at this point. The positions of Israel and Hamas are still incompatible. Hamas is still demanding complete Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, including from the Philadelphia corridor, and Israel is insisting that that's a non-starter, that Israel will not withdraw from that border corridor. So mediators, including Egypt and the US, are coming up with different formulations of that deal. There's been talks of ceasefire. The latest one that's been put forward by CIA Chief Bill Burns would see a 28-day ceasefire in return for the release of 8 hostages and the release of dozens of Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails. There's been a variation of that put forward by Egypt a few days ago for a shorter ceasefire in return for the release, I think, of 5 Israeli hostages. So this is what the mediators are working with. But again, we don't know who's in charge of the file, of the negotiation file within Hamas. It's leadership in Doha, but we don't really know who's in charge. Some people are more moderate, some people are more extreme. Some people will also want to appear and to take a hard stance after Sinwar is gone. But also, we don't see much flexibility on the part of Benjamin Netanyahu at this point. So it's hard to predict, and I think mediators themselves are trying to keep expectations low at this point.
In terms of Sinwar himself, the IDF put out some more footage yesterday, a head cam video which was on one of the soldiers who had been engaging in a firefight with 4 terrorists. They were killed. It wasn't until later that we understand that they realized one of those was Sinwar. What's your take, having seen that footage, as to what was going on in that firefight?
I've seen the footage. To me personally, it doesn't say much, to be honest. But I think what's interesting is to understand how Sinwar really died. The IDF keeps saying that it was hit by basically a slab of concrete that fell on his head, but you see that there's bullet holes in his head, and there was um, a doctor for the Forensic Center of Medicine in near Tel Aviv was interviewed to the New York Times the day after Sinwar was killed and said that it was actually killed by a gunshot, and you can see a bullet hole in his head. So I think what's interesting here. That's something that is not being talked about enough. There's been speculation online that he killed himself. I think it's probably not the case. But there was probably a sharpshooter nearby that shot him in the head, and I wonder why this is not being discussed publicly by the IDF. It's interesting because at first Iran denied that any damage had been caused in the first hours after the attack, and then it's emerging like over the week that there's probably some serious damage has been caused. There's talk of this S-300 and S-400 air defense systems that were provided by Russia that were protecting military and nuclear installations inside Iran. And apparently Russia, busy with its war in Ukraine, will not be able to provide those again. So the Iranians are basically exposed to a future Israeli attack. So no material damage has been caused to oil installations or to nuclear facilities, but definitely their air defense system has been damaged considerably. And it's interesting that we see an escalation in rhetoric from those first hours when the Iranians said that the attack had been repelled, and it appeared that they didn't want to retaliate again. Yesterday, actually, the IRGC leader said that Israel should expect a terrible, devastating attack. So I wonder if it took them a few days, basically, to realize the scope of the damage. The feeling and the estimation of the Israeli defense system is that a retaliation from Iran is going to happen. It could take a while. It's probably going to be after the US elections. Last time it took them a couple of months to respond. So yeah, we're prepared.